In today's episode, we're speaking to Marco Bonanni. Marco is an accomplished author and entrepreneur dedicated to helping individuals unleash their full potential with the passion for personal development and self-improvement. Marco has written transformative book titled Success Secrets: Unlocking Your Potential for Greatness, drawing from his own experience and extensive research. And he shares practical strategies and insights to empower readers in their journey towards success. So let's speak to Marco and find out how he changed his life by changing his mindset. And if you want to upgrade your money mindset, then click on the link www.millionairefoundations.com and watch my free training. Welcome. This is Gull, your money mindset expert. And today I'm speaking to the one and only Marco Bonanni. Welcome, Marco.
Thank you, Gull. Really appreciate being on the show.
Thank you so much for joining us, Marco. Marco, everyone's heard your intro. They've heard how fabulous you are, but please, in your own words, tell everybody what it is that you do.
Fantastic. Well, my background is IT and digital marketing. I went through a lot of small business journeys and ventures throughout the years. I went through a lot of ups and downs. So I've got a lot of trials and tribulations and many adversities, overcoming those and experiencing a lot of growth through a process that I'll go through in more detail. Essentially, what I do is I help other people learn what I've learned through a process that I've actually turned it into a process that I've kind of perfected in a way that it's going to create a template that anybody can follow to overcome some of the challenges that you would normally experience while you're going through any sort of career or business, and overcoming challenges. And the objective that I help other people accomplish is really just looking at their goals differently, and a process that I can guide them through actually achieving their goals faster through a methodology that I've learned. And to go into a little more detail, I went through a lot of ups and downs and actually hit rock bottom maybe more than once in my career. And bouncing back from those is really difficult. And a lot of times people want to just give up and throw in the towel. Luckily for me, I'm more of a stubborn and persistent person, which has actually helped me overcome the challenges to keep going. I think a lot of times we just end up wanting to give up, and finding the courage and the motivation to get back up and keep going is really challenging. So I can talk to a lot of that experience, and I've developed a lot of expertise around it. And
why don't you talk us through? So let's start from the beginning then. So talk us through from what was your so how did you actually end up doing this work in the first place? So talk us through your journey in terms of what were you doing initially, and then how did you pivot to doing this particular thing, and what particular, you just referred to some challenges, what challenges did you have to overcome? Can you talk us through that as well?
Sure. So I mean, I grew up a very average lifestyle. There was nothing significant. So I didn't come from like a wealthy background or anything. Come from a bilingual family, immigration, so there was nothing really that I was stepping into. I had to kind of work my way through just like everybody else, starting from going through education and learning, finding a career path. And I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit where I wanted to pursue something on my own and develop a small business. And I think maybe not having a coach or a mentor initially and just pushing through all the trial and errors, I think that's sort of what likely led me to experience a lot of the challenges and pitfalls that I may have been able to overcome had I had some more additional guidance or coaching
Well, that's the case generally, but so talk us through a particular obstacle that you had. I mean, if that's the case, that's what you and I are now coaches. That if you don't have the support, you're always going to go and fumble over, and you're going to you're going to make more mistakes. If you have a coach to support you, you're less likely to do that. So talk us through that. Talk us through something that you had to overcome, something that made you think, oh my God, had I known, I wish I had some support or so forth. Talk us through one of those instances.
Sure. So I think a lot of people probably run into financial obstacles, running out of money in trying to establish a venture, making some financial errors during the journey, spending too much on certain aspects of your venture, your business, making a lot of those money mistakes that we could try to avoid, setting up a little bit better of a plan, maybe having some goals, taking a step back and measuring your progress a little bit more frequently. So not doing some of those things sort of had walked me into a lot of downturns. And when I say rock bottom, a few of them were financial mistakes. One of them was a legal mistake that caused me a lot of troubles with one of the ventures that I was involved with. And so getting back up from those is, of course, it's a valuable experience. I mean, all the big pitfalls always give you the biggest lessons in life.
100%, 100%. Those so-called failures are your biggest teachers. So I never see them as failures. I see them as lessons.
No, for sure.
But having the courage to overcome them and carrying on, that's what distinguishes between those who succeed and those who never do and who end up being failures. There's no such thing as failure if you never stop, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a learning progress. And one of the things that I always look at too is, when we're looking at what we're working on, if you can imagine the stock market chart, we can see like when a stock market crashes, when we take a downturn in our business. But if we actually zoomed out, if we were actually able to zoom out on our progress chart over time, we might actually just see those little downturns not so catastrophic, so that when we're going through them, it feels like the world is ending. But if we were to take a step back and have a bigger lens, we might actually just see those as a small downturn, but we've overcome so many and we've come so far in our journey already. And so just having the courage just to keep going and, remembering those pitfalls as lessons and education and experience that you can then later on apply down the road to make better decisions and have better progress, faster movement forward, and that such thing.
I mean, talk us through this. And okay, so when you do have, and I'm sure you're not the only one, plenty of entrepreneurs come across this obstacle where they run out of cash. This is why everybody says in business, cash is king, right? So you need to focus on your cash flow. You have to keep focusing on cash flow. And even now, when I'm buying additional businesses, not just this business, when I'm buying businesses, my biggest concern is to make sure there's cash in the account to carry on running the business as we, as the handover comes over, and obviously there's disruption in the sales and whatever else, but there should be money in the account to be able to take care of the daily expenses. And when you're first starting out business, I know a lot of us, including myself, overlook the importance of cash flow. And we end up living like jobs. It's hand to mouth. We get a paycheck and we can pay with one, and then we're starving again. So this feast and famine series starts.
Absolutely.
So how did you, once you hit your rock bottom with money, how did you overcome that? How did you persevere through that? Did you take a loan out? Did you say, no, I'm going to find a different way? Because I find in those situations, there are three things people can do. They can either give up, which a lot of people do, or people go and take a further loan out, take it more further into it. And there's third kind of entrepreneurs who I think are the most exciting ones, who say, okay, so we need this money. How can we create money? And they don't think of money as debt or borrowing or anything else. They think, well, money is something that's energy. I can create it. So they go out and provide a service or value and create money on demand. I think those entrepreneurs are the most exciting ones. So how did you overcome this obstacle?
Sure. There's obviously different options for people. I mean, if you're able to do a good business plan, a good marketing plan, and have a if everything lines up, which rarely does, maybe you'll never hit these walls.
Yeah, that's unlikely. Unlikely. We've even had Elon Musk share the fact that just before he won the contract with NASA, literally just before they won it, they were on the point of bankruptcy with SpaceX, and they were literally about to file for bankruptcy when they won the contract, the $1 billion contract with NASA. And that not only survived them, that made them that thrived them, and then they were flying. But until they won that contract, and that came at the 13th hour as well, literally the last minute, they were on the point of bankruptcy. So it doesn't happen just to you and I; it can happen to the biggest entrepreneurs, you know.
Absolutely, and I do remember another interview with Jeff Bezos that I watched, and he even talks about how many failures they've had that's cost. Some of them were worth hundreds of millions of dollars worth of setbacks. So we're not immune, no matter at what level we're at. And I think as we go through, when we're just starting out, maybe we're a little bit eager, and if we have a little bit of cash reserves, we just jump and get into it right away, maybe without really evaluating some of the plan and implementation process. Maybe you jump in and you start to see the end of the rope a little bit too soon, and you start to pull back on the expenses, and maybe sometimes you don't know which ones to slow down on. Maybe you do have a little bit of cash flow, either from if you're starting a side hustle and you have your main job and you're just using money from your income to support the business. You can maybe you're overextending yourself and you decide to cut back on some of the expenses. So it really just takes more of a methodical plan initially before you just jump into things. And having somebody that maybe you can bounce the ideas off of, maybe get some insight. I always find value in sharing ideas and collaborating, because you can share experiences, get ideas, avoid those pitfalls by getting other people's experiences to help you avoid and learn a little bit quicker. And then revenue is always going to be up and down. Like, I've never seen an instance where it's a moonshot. Like it goes up, and then you ride the wave a little bit, you add, grow, expand, and then the revenue hits a plateau or retracts, and then you scale back a little bit. And again, it goes back to that same methodology of the stock market chart.
Yeah.
It's got its ups and downs. You got to ride those waves, plan, and always have sort of like a strategy for plan B, how you can pivot, and have all those things, and have those as expectations too, because sometimes when we're brand new and we get started, we just think everything is just going to flow and we're always going to have no problems. But and the mindset around all of this, and this is kind of where it takes me to the second phase of my journey, because for almost 20 years I've sort of done it, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Joe Dispenza.
I am.
Okay, I'm a
big fan of Joe Dispenza.
Fantastic, because I'm going to get into a little bit of that as my second phase of my journey, because the first 20 years of my journey has been more of that, what he describes as matter versus matter, just trying to force everything, not really understanding that there's a lot of other energy that we could access to move ourselves towards our desires. And so the first 20 years or so, I've always just been push. That's sort of the conditioning that I grew up with, how I'm, subconsciously programmed. And so I have all those programs that run in my subconscious brain and make those repetitive decisions that sort of lead me down. And a lot of times just feels like I'm going in circles. I'll find a new opportunity. I'll play the same program with it. It goes up, it hits a wall, and it falls back down again. And sort of played this over and over again so many times. And with the experience, it seems like I'm able to actually find better and bigger opportunities each time. And then each time you hit that wall, the fall is even bigger. And so I've had enough of those where I'm not afraid to start over, but I've had a few of them. but now I'm taking a whole different approach. And so the second sort of phase of my journey has sort of pivoted into what Joe Dispenza refers to as the quantum, accessing the field.
Mm.
And I've started to do a lot of studying, and really where my biggest catastrophic failure happened around 2019. I've never seen such a rock bottom before, and really just attributes to finding better opportunities because you have knowledge and experience and you're able to take on bigger things. And then when you hit that wall and you fall down even harder. And so in 2019 for me is really where I started to reevaluate the entire thinking process of how I've gone through all these journey. And I've started doing a lot of different processes. And this is sort of what leads me to some of the tools and strategies that I can offer to help other people. And so in 2019, what actually happened is, during the pandemic and all the lockdowns I'd found myself with a lot of extra time. And so I started to learn more. And I've always had times during my journey where I've started to take a step back and retool myself, add education. And during the 2019 phase, I started to watch a lot more YouTube reels and looking for specific answers to maybe some of the challenges that I've had over the last 20 years. And it's led me to a whole different realm of thinking and mindset. So
I'm going to stop and talk there for a second. I think that's important to know. And I always say this: when the student's ready, the teacher appears. And I think a lot of people are familiar with that. And I do, and I'm going to send the second part of that saying as well, which I think is, I can't remember who said this. Is it Tao? I think it was Tao. It's from the Eastern philosophies. When the student's ready, the teacher appears, and when the student's really ready, the teacher disappears. That's the whole phrase is. And I think that's happened in my life with a lot of my mentors. But I think it's right. When you were ready for that mentor to appear, Joe Dispenza, in whatever form, books, CDs,
for sure,
whatever, how, he sort of turned up in your life, and then it allowed you to understand that there's a different way of creating a reality, different way of living. And that's what you went through. And I think that's beautiful. And I think you need to acknowledge that too, because there's so many people who would go through their life, and the universe, unlike you're not unique. I'm not unique. Universe gives these opportunities to a lot of people, but most people fail to recognize these opportunities. They fail to recognize these mentors. They fail to recognize these new pathways. They fail to recognize the universe is pivoting them, changing their direction, making them aware that it's an easier way to live than what they are currently living in. And they go into victim mentality, but that's what I call the victim mentality. Whereas with you, I want to congratulate you, and I want you to acknowledge this, and I want you to really appreciate this about yourself. When you hit rock bottom, when you saw you were actively looking for, and that's another reason why we probably found Joe Dispenza, because when you actively look for an answer, the universe provides you with an answer. And that's when you found Joe Dispenza. And then I'm so glad you did, because I think he's amazing. And to learn a new process, to know that there's a different way out there from what you're doing at the moment, is a step up, but it really requires you to acknowledge that up until now you've been playing a very small game, and it's been a very, against yourself. Literally, you have been playing a game against yourself. And when you actually acknowledge that and take responsibility for everything that showed up in your life because of it, because it's your own fault, then can you dream big, and you can actually go ahead and have these amazing goals that you can go and conquer the world, literally.
Absolutely. And it was literally the process of seeking for more knowledge, answers. And I started with YouTube, and I've always been an avid reader. I started reading more, and in 2020, I discovered a couple of key books that really helped change my mindset and my processes. Of course, you probably heard of Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yes, absolutely.
When I read his book and I watched a couple of his videos, I learned the process of habit stacking, which I think is also mentioned in another book called Tiny Habits. And I started to implement that in my everyday life. And I started to really evaluate because what I was looking for was, what do I need to change that's going to give me the results I'm looking for?
Yeah.
I knew there was something that just wasn't, like, I kept feeling like my life was on replay, and every so many cycles or phases or years, it would just sort of come and loop around again. And I was just wondering, like what, something doesn't seem normal for me.
You felt like you were chasing your tail, which a lot of people can relate to. They can really feel like, I have some success and I think I'm about to have a breakthrough, and then something happens and I crash and I start from square one again, and then I build myself up, and you're literally chasing your tail because you can't go beyond a certain level.
Yeah, for sure. And so I went through this process of just sort of examining what my day looks like, what my weeks look like, and just using Atomic Habits as a guide to figure out, what am I doing on a regular basis? What are the things that are maybe tripping me up? So I was looking for those actions that were causing me to create this loop. And then what I then figured out was, the loop wasn't externally, it was internal. It was how I was thinking. And so then when I made the discovery that it was actually how I think, because Joe Dispenza talks about how you think and how you feel determines how you act.
Exactly.
How you act creates your personality, and your personality creates your personal reality. So then I rewound it all the way back to my thought processes. And so then I started to figure out how to do the meditations. And then I started to learn how to practice gratitude, how to do affirmations, visualizations. And then that sort of led me to the second phase of my journey, which has been really just eye-opening, because as I started to figure out how I needed to rethink and reprogram myself, I started to experiment with the different ideas. So the meditation was key, because it allowed me to, settle my conscious brain, access my subconscious brain, start to figure all that stuff out. And this is really the enlightenment that I'm experiencing now, is because I'm starting to figure out that a lot of the thoughts that we have come from our beliefs, and some of the things that we do are coming from limiting beliefs. And so I started to learn how to do affirmations properly, which is not just saying I am successful. It's trying to figure out, why are you feeling limited? Why aren't you not experiencing the success you're having? So starting to having those interviews with yourself to figure out where your limiting beliefs actually lie. Once you figure out what your limiting beliefs are, then you create the opposing statement that goes against your limiting beliefs, because we're all programmed through repetition. And so once you know your limiting beliefs, you can start to program the opposite of those limiting beliefs, so that you can start to create those new beliefs where you can figure out, okay, why am I not successful? And then learn the beliefs that are limiting you from achieving the success you want, and then reprogramming yourself through repetition. And so those are those exercises that I'm starting to work through very recently, and I'm starting to learn through, you've probably heard of Neville Goddard.
Yes, of course.
I found some fantastic content of how the explanations around how, we can do those practices properly, because this is where a lot of the times we hear about meditation, we hear about practicing gratitude and affirmations and doing visualizations, but doing them in a way that actually activates our thoughts properly. And then going back to Joe Dispenza's, because our thoughts is what we send out the signal to the field, and then our feelings is what draws
it experiences back to us. Yeah, of course it does.
And so and then I think some of the key things is the goals. So the old ways that I would use to set my goals would be to say, you set it, and this is kind of interesting, because changing your paradigm of how you think around goals. For example, the traditional goal setting is, you pick what you want, you pick the date you want to achieve it by, and maybe you can actually do that, but there's a lot of things that you don't have control over. And this is where setting goals becomes a really tricky process, because if you start to work with the field instead of matter versus matter, you can't tell the universe to bring me this success by a certain date. And so then what you need to do is as you start to shift towards the field and you start to do manifestations and practicing all of the visualizations and all of the techniques that you would do to create that reality, you have to separate yourself from when it will happen, because the universe will give it to you when you're ready.
Yeah.
And then the things that you have to look for are also different. When we want to be successful, we might interpret that into a certain, if that's material wealth or whatever your interpretation of success might be. You might want, a fancy house or something. We can't tell the universe what to give us. The universe we will manifest what we desire, and then how we look for those signals that it's actually happening, that becomes the exciting part. So for example, one of the things that I used to always wonder is, it probably happens to a lot of people, is you wake up in the middle of the night and you have ideas, and you never really think that those ideas are anything other than an idea. But what it actually is the universe is giving you a task. They're giving you the next step. They're giving you instructions on what to do next.
Yeah.
And if you also look at those as gifts and you give gratitude to those gifts, you'll start to receive more of them. And those are the things that help move you forward. So as you're giving gratitude to those gifts that the universe is providing you, you'll start to receive more and more of them. And so this is the process that, is really challenging for us to get away from our old method of thinking and adopting this new method of moving forward, is looking at things a little bit differently. So, you'll see signals as you're starting to manifest. So one of the things that I do is I don't do a vision board, but I do practice visualization. So and this has just happened recently. This is why I kind of wanted to talk about this, because
I think we'll talk more in depth about this in the Wednesday's Money Talkies.
Sure.
For the time being, it's about your experience and how you move forward. And I'm more interested in your thinking, not the actual methodology at this moment in time. So just to wrap this up, tell us the key takeaways from the key takeaways that you have had. You want to give our listeners, based on the most recent downturn, which was in 2019. I know you've done phenomenally well since then, so you've turned your life around really, really rapidly. And I think from the intro, people have already heard that you're doing amazingly well, and that's a short span of 3 to 4 years. So give us the key takeaways that you want our audience to take away from this conversation, and to know that they can replicate your similar results to you.
Sure. So I think one of the biggest takeaways that I can give right now is look at what you're doing. Look at your actions, what you're doing right now, and remember that those actions that you're doing are following a process of thinking that you've been following for a long time. And those thinking processes come from the programming in our subconscious brain and our beliefs. And so if you really want to change where your outcome is and where you're going and your progress, you have to start taking a step back and examining how you think, how you feel, your beliefs, and figuring out a process of how you can make those adjustments.
Okay, wonderful. So tell us, Marco, how can we connect with you? Where can you find you on the internet?
Sure. So you can always visit my website through tapnet.com. I've got a lot of links on my site where you can connect with me on all different social platforms. You can download my book, Success Secrets, which goes into a little bit of detail of the story that I talked about today. And I'll also provide the mentoring and coaching through my Success Secrets program.
Wonderful. Now, if you are listening to us on the podcast, then links to Marco that he just mentioned and all his other links will be in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, then down below in the description section, once again, we'll have all these links. Check him out. And especially if you want to help promote your book and you want to focus on that aspect, he's brilliant. So do go and check him out and connect with him. Thank you so much, Marco, for today's episode. Thank you so much for being a guest. We will have to have you back on Money Talkies, but today, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for listening to me and Marco today on Fire the Future. I will be back with another amazing guest, finding out how they changed their life by changing their mindset. Until the next time we meet, this is Gull signing off. Take care and bye for now.